This is Wilhelmine von Hillern's public domain work, On the Cross, a romance of the Passion play at Oberammergau. Chapter 22. Falling Stars. The new mistress of ceremonies isn't popular. Countess Wildenau is said to have fallen into disgrace already. She did not ride in the Queen's carriage at the recent great parade. That is perfectly natural. It was to be expected when a lady so unaccustomed to put any constraint upon herself as Countess Wildenau was appointed to such a position. She is said to make constant blunders. If she chooses, she keeps the Queen and the whole court waiting. She is reported to have arrived at court 15 minutes too late a short time ago, and to have forgotten to present a number of ladies. People are indignant with her. Poor woman, she takes infinite trouble, but the place is not a suitable one for her. She is absent-minded and makes mistakes, which are unpardonable in a mistress of ceremonies. Yes, if the Queen's cousin, the hereditary Prince of Metten-Barnheim, did not uphold her, the Queen would have dropped her long ago. She is seen at court only when she is acting as representative. She has not succeeded in establishing personal relations with Her Majesty. Such, at the end of a few months, were the opinions of society, and they were just. It seemed as though the curse of those whom she had deserted rested upon her. Do what she would, she had no success in this position. As on the mountain peak towering into the upper air, every warm current condenses into a cloud, so in the cool, transparent atmosphere of very lofty and conspicuous positions, the faintest breath of secret struggles and passions seems to condense into masses of clouds which often gather darkly around the most brilliant personalities, veiling their traits. The passionate, romantic impulse, which was constantly at war with the aristocratic birth and education of the Countess, was one of those currents which unconsciously and involuntarily must enter as an alien element in the crystalline clearness of these peaks of society. This was the explanation of the mystery that the Countess, greatly admired in private life and always a welcome guest at court, could not fill an official position successfully. The slight cloud which, in her private life, only served to surround her with a halo of romance which rendered the free independent woman of rank doubly interesting, was absolutely unendurable in a lady of the court representing her sovereign. There, everything must be clear, calm, official. The impersonal element of royalty, as it exists in our day, especially in the women of reigning houses, will not permit any individuality to make itself prominent near the throne. All passionate emotions and peculiarities are abhorrent, because, even in individuals, they are emanations of the seething popular elements which sovereigns must at once rule and fear. Countess Wildenau's constant excitement, restless glances, absence of mind, and feverish alternations of mood unconsciously expressed the vengeance of the spirit of the common people insisted in her husband, and the Queen, in her subtle sensibility, therefore had a secret timidity and aversion to the new mistress of ceremonies which she could not conquer. Thus the first mists in the atmosphere near the throne arose. The vapours gathered into clouds, but the clouds were seen by the keen-eyed public as the sun of royal favour vanished behind them. It is far better never to have been prominent than to be forced to retire. The Countess was a great lady, whose power seemed immovable and unassailable so long as she lived independently. Now it was seen that she was on the verge of a downfall. And now there was no occasion for further consideration of the woman hitherto so much envied. Vengeance could fearlessly be taken upon her for always having handsomer toilets, giving better dinners, attracting more admirers, and being allowed to do unpunished what would be unpardonable in others. A woman who is continually occupied with herself cannot be mistress of ceremonies. I see that clearly, she said one day to the prince. If any position requires self-denial, it is this. And self-denial has never been my forte. I ought to have known that before accepting the place. People imagine that the court would be the very field where the seeds of egotism would flourish most abundantly. It is not true. Whoever wishes to reap for himself should remain aloof. Only the utmost unselfishness, the most rigid fulfillment of duty can exist there. But I, Prince, am a spoiled, ill-trained creature who learned nothing during the few years of my unhappy marriage save to hate constraint and shun pain. What is to be done with such a useless mortal? Love her, replied Prince Emil, as quietly as if he were speaking of a game of chess, and see that she is placed in a position where she need not obey, but merely command. Natures created to rule should not serve. The pebble is destined to pave the path of daily life, the diamond to sparkle. Who would upbraid the latter because it serves no other purpose? Its value lies in itself, but only connoisseurs know how to prize it. Thus her friend always consoled her and strengthened her natural tendencies. But where men are too indulgent to us, destiny is all the more severe. This is the amends for the moral sins of society, the equalization of the undeserved privileges of individuals compared with the sad fate of thousands. Prince Emil's efforts could not succeed in soothing the pangs of Madeleine von Wildenau's conscience, for he did not know the full extent of her guilt. If he knew all, she would lose him too. Josepha took care to torture the mother's heart by the reports sent from Italy. Freya was silent. Since that bitter letter which he wrote, she had heard nothing more from him. He had hidden himself in his solitary retreat, as a sick lion seeks the depths of its cave, and she dared not go to him there, though a secret yearning often made her start from her sleep with her husband's name on her lips and tears in her eyes. In addition to this, she was troubled by her Wildenau, who was becoming still more urgent in his offers to purchase the hunting castle, and often made strangely significant remarks, as though he was on the track of some discovery. The child with the treacherous resemblance was far away. But if this man was watching, that fact itself might attract his notice, because it dated from the day when he made the first allusions. She lay awake many nights pondering over this mystery, but could not discover what had given him the clue to her secret. She did not suspect that it was the child himself who, in an unwatched moment, had met the curious stranger and made fatal answers to his cunning questions, telling him of the beautiful lady who came to see Goth who had been God, in Ammergau, and that he loved the beautiful lady dearly, much better than Mother Josepha. Question and answer were easy, but the inference was equally so. It was evident to the Inquisitor that a relation existed here quite compromising enough to serve as a handle against the Countess if the exact connection could be discovered. Cousin Wildenau and his brother resolved from that day forth to watch the Countess's mysterious actions sharply. This was the latest and most interesting sport of the disinherited branch of the Wildenau family. But the game they were pursuing had a powerful protector in the prince. They must work slowly and cautiously. At court also, it was his influence which sustained her. The queen, out of consideration for him, showed the utmost patience in dealing with the countess spite of her total absence of sympathy with her. Thus the unfortunate woman lived in constant uncertainty. Her soul was filled with bitterness by the experiences she now endured. She felt like dagger thrusts the malevolence, the contempt with which she had been treated since the sun of royal favour had grown dim. She lost her self-command and no longer knew what she was doing. Her pride rebelled. A Wildenau, a Princess von Frankenberg, need not tolerate such treatment. Her usual graciousness deserted her and, in its place, she assumed a cold, haughty scorn, which she even displayed while performing the duties of her office, and thereby still more incensed everyone against her. Persons whom she ought to have honoured she ignored. Gradations of rank and lists of noble families, the alpha and omega of a mistress of ceremonies, were never in her mind. People entitled to the first position were relegated to the third, and similar blunders were numerous. Complaints and annoyances of all kinds poured in, and at a state dinner in honour of the visit of a royal prince, she was compelled to endure, in the presence of the whole court, a rebuke from the queen who specially distinguished a person whom she had slighted. This dinner became fateful to her. Wherever she turned, she beheld triumphant or sarcastic smiles. Wherever she approached a group, conversation ceased with the marked suddenness which does not seek to conceal that the newcomer has been the subject of the talk. Nay, she often encountered a glance which seemed to say, "Why do you still linger among us?" It happened also that the prince had been summoned to Cannes by his father's illness and was not at hand to protect her. She had hoped that he would return in time for the dinner, but he did not come. She was entirely deserted. A few compassionate souls, like the kind-hearted duchess whom she met at the Passion play, her ladies, in waiting, and some maids of honour, joined her, but she felt in their graciousness a pity which humbled her more than all the insults. And her friends. The gentleman who belonged to the circle of her intimate acquaintances had for some time adopted a more familiar tone, as if to imply that she must accept whatever they choose to offer. She was no longer even beautiful. A pallid, grief-worn face, with hollow eyes gazing hopelessly into vacancy, found no admirers in this circle. And as every look, every countenance wore a hostile expression, her own image gazed reproachfully at her from the mirror. The dazzling fair neck with its marvellous contours supported a head whose countenance was weary and prematurely aged. "It is all over with you," cried the mirror. "It is all over with you," smiled the lips of society. "It is all over with you. You may be glad if we still come to your dinners." The wine-scented breath of her former intimate friends insultingly near her seemed to whisper. Was this the world to which she had sacrificed her heart and conscience? Was this the honor for which she hourly suffered tortures? And on the wintry mountain height, the husband who had naught on earth save the paltry scrap of love she bestowed was perishing. She had avoided him for months because to her he represented that uncomfortable Christianity whose asceticism has survived the civilization of thousands of years. Yes, this Christianity of the Nazarene who walked the earth so humbly in a laborer's garb is the friend of the despised and humbled. It asks no questions about crowns and the favor of courts, human power and distinction. And she who had trembled and sinned for the wretched illusions, the glitter of the honors of this brief life, was she to despise a morality which, in its beggar's garb, stands high above all for which the greatest and most powerful tremble? Again the symbol of the renewed bond between God and the world, the cross, rose before her, and on it hung the body of the Redeemer, radiant in its chaste, divine beauty. That body which for her descended from the cross where it hung for the whole world, and, after clasping it in her arms, she repined because it was only the image of what no earthly desire will ever attain, no matter how many human hearts glow with the flames of love, so long as the world endures. "My Christus, my sacrificed husband!" cried a voice in her heart so loudly that she did not hear a question from the Queen. "It is incredible!" someone exclaimed angrily near her. She started from her reverie. "Your Majesty!" The Queen had already passed on without waiting for a reply. Whispers and nods ran through the circle. Every eye was fixed upon her. What had the Queen wanted? She tried to hurry after her. Her Majesty had disappeared. She was already going through the next hall. But the distance was so great, she could not reach her. The space seemed to increase as she moved on. She felt that she was on the verge of fainting and dragged herself into a secluded room. The members of the court were retiring. Confusion arose. The mistress of ceremonies was absent just at the moment of the conge. No one had time to seek her. All were assembling to take leave, and then hurrying after servants and wraps. Carriage after carriage rolled away. The rooms were empty. The lackeys came to extinguish the lights. The Countess lay on a sofa, alone and deserted in the last hall of the suite. "In heaven's name, is your Highness ill?" cried an old major, Domo, offering his assistance to the lady, who slowly rose. "Is it all over?" she asked, gazing vacantly around. "Where is my servant?" "He is still waiting outside for your Highness," replied the old gentleman, trying to assist her. "Shall I call a doctor or a maid?" "No, thank you. I am well again. It was only an attack of giddiness," said the Countess, walking slowly out of the palace. "Who is driving tonight?" she asked the footman, as he put her fur cloak over her bare shoulders. "Martin, your Highness." "Very well. Then go home and say that I shall not come, but visit the estates." "It is bitterly cold." "Your Highness," observed the major domo, who had attended her to the equipage. "That does not matter. Is the beaver robe in the carriage?" "Certainly, your Highness. What time is it? Late?" "Oh no, just 9, your Highness." "Forward then," Martin knew where. The major domo closed the door, and away dashed the horses into the glittering winter night along the familiar but long neglected road. It was indeed a cold drive. The ground was frozen hard, and the carriage windows were covered with frost flowers. The Countess' temples were throbbing violently. Her heart beat eagerly with longing for the husband whom she had deserted for this base world. The mood of that Ammergau epoch again asserted its rights, and she penitently hastened to seek the beautiful gift she had so thoughtlessly cast aside. With a heart full of rancour over the injustice and lovelessness experienced in society, her soul plunged deeply into the sweet chalice of the love and poesy of those days, a love which was religion, a religion which was love. "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal." Aye, for sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal she had squandered warm heart's blood, and the sorrowing soul of the people from whose sacred simplicity her wearied soul was to have drawn fresh youth, gazed tearfully at her from the eyes of her distant son. The horses went so slowly tonight, she thought. No pace is swift enough for a repentant heart which longs to atone. He would be angry, she would have a bitter struggle with him, but she would soften his wrath. She would put forth all her charms, she would be loving and beautiful, fairer than he had ever seen her, for she had never appeared before him in full dress, with diamonds sparkling on her snowy neck and heavy gold bracelets clasping her wonderful arms. She would tell him that she repented, that everything should be as of yore when she plighted her troth to him by the glare of the bridal torches of the forest conflagration, and, feeling Valkyrie might in her veins, dreamed Valkyrie dreams. She drew a long breath and compared the pallid court lady of the present, who fainted at a proof of disfavour and a few spiteful glances, with the Valkyrie of those days. Was it a mere delusion which made her so strong? No. Even if the God whom she saw in him was a delusion, the love which swelled in her veins with that might which defied the elements was divine, and, by every standard of philosophy, aesthetics and birth, as well as morality, had a right to its existence. Then why had she been ashamed of it? On account of trivial prejudices, petty vanities, in other words, weakness. Not Freya, but she was too petty for this great love. Yet wait, my forsaken husband. Your wife is coming today with a love that is worthy of you, ardent enough to atone in a single hour for the neglect of years. As she breathed upon the frost-coated pane, melting an opening in the crust of ice. The castle already stood before her. The height was almost reached. Then, a sudden jolt. A cry from the coachman, and the carriage toppled toward the precipice. With ready nerve, the Countess sprang out on the opposite side. "What is it? Why? The horses shied at sight of her Freya," said the coachman, as Freya, with an iron hand, curbed the rearing animals. The Countess hastened toward him. Aided by the coachman, he quieted the trembling creatures. "I beg your pardon, your Highness," said Freya, still panting from the exertion he had made. "I came out of the wood unexpectedly, and the dark figure frightened them. Fortunately, I could seize their reins." "Drive on, Martin," the Countess ordered. "I will walk with her Freya." The coachman obeyed. She put her hand through Freya's arm. "No wonder that the horses shied, my husband. You look so strange. What were you doing in the woods in the middle of the night?" "What I always do, wandering about." "That is not right. You ought to sleep." "Sleep?" Freya repeated with a bitter laugh. "Is this my reception, Joseph? Pardon me, it makes me laugh when you talk of sleeping. Look," he raised his hat, "even in the starlight you can see the white hairs which have come since you were last here, sent my child away, and made me wholly a hermit. No sleep has come to my eyes, and my hair has grown grey." The Countess perceived with horror the change which had taken place in him. Threads of silver mingled with his black locks, his eyes were sunken, his whole figure was emaciated, his chest narrowed. He was a sick man. She could not endure the sight. It was the most terrible reproach to her. She fixed her eyes on the ground. "I had made such a lovely plan. Martin has the key of the outside door. I was going to steal gently to the side of your couch and kiss your sleeping lips. I thank you for the kind intention, but do you imagine that I could have slept after receiving that letter which brought me the news that I was betrayed? Betrayed once more, and, after all the sacred promises made during your last visit, you had done exactly the opposite, and accepted a position which separated you still farther from your husband and child, bound you still more firmly to the world. Do you imagine that the days are enough to ponder over such thoughts? No, one must call in the nights to aid. You know that well, and I should be far better satisfied if you would say honestly, 'I know that I am killing you, that your strength is being consumed with sorrow, but I have no wish to change this state of affairs,' instead of feigning that you cannot understand why I should not sleep quietly, and wondering that I wander all night in the forest. But fear nothing. I am perfectly calm. I shall reproach you no farther," he added in a milder tone, "for I have closed accounts with myself, with you, with life. Do not weep, I promised, that when you sought your husband you should find him. I will not be false to my pledge. Come, lay your little head upon my breast. You are trembling. Are you cold? Lean on me, and let us walk faster that I may shelter you in the warm room. Wandering dove. How did you happen suddenly to return to your husband's lonely nest in the cold night, in this bitter winter season? Why did not you stay in the warm cote with the others, where you had everything that you desire? Do you miss anything? Tell me, what do you seek with me? For what does your little heart long?" His voice again sank to the enthralling whisper which had formerly made all her pulses throb with a sensation of indescribable bliss. His great heart took all its pains and suffering, and ceased to judge her. The faithless dove found the nest open, and his gentle hand scattered for her the crumbs of his lost happiness, as the starving man divides his last crust with those who are poorer still. She could not speak. Overpowered by emotion, she leaned against him, allowing herself to be carried rather than led up the steep ascent. But she could not wait. Even as they moved, her lips sought his, her little hands clasped his, and a murmur tremulous with emotion. "This is what I missed," answered the sweet question. The stars above sparkled with 1,000 rays. The whole silent, glittering, icy winter night rejoiced. At last the castle was reached, and the warm room received them. It did not exactly deserve the name, for the fire in the stove had gone out, but neither felt it. The glow in their hearts sufficed. "You must take what I can offer. I am all alone, you know." "All alone," she repeated with a happy smile which he could see by the starlight shining through the open window. Another kiss, a long, silent embrace was exchanged. "Now let me light a lamp, that I may take off your cloak and make you comfortable." Or, "Do you mean to spend the night so?" He was bewitching in his mournful jesting, his sad happiness. "Ah, it is so long since I have seen you thus," Madeleine murmured. "World, I can laugh at you now," cried an exultant voice in her heart, for the old love, the old spell was hers once more. And as he again appeared before her in his mild greatness and beauty, she desired to show herself his peer, display herself to him in all the dazzling radiance of her beauty. As he turned to light the lamp, she let the heavy cloak fall and stood in all her loveliness, her snowy neck framed by the dark velvet bodice, on which all the stars in the firmament outside seemed to have fallen and clung to rest there for a moment. Freya turned with the lamp in his hand. His eyes flashed. A faint cry escaped his lips. She waited, smiling, for an expression of delight, but he remained motionless, gazing at her as if he beheld a ghost, while the glance fixed upon the figure, whose diamonds sparkled with a myriad rays, constantly grew more gloomy, his bearing more rigid. A deep flush suffused his pallid face. "And this is my wife?" At last fell in a muffled, expressionless tone from his lips. "No, it is not she." The Countess did not understand his meaning. She imagined that the superb costume so impressed him that he dared not approach her, and she must show him by redoubled tenderness that he was not too lowly for this superb woman. "It is your wife, indeed it is, and all this splendour veils a heart which is yours, and yours alone," she cried, throwing herself on his breast and clasping her white arms around him. But with a violent gesture he released himself, drawing back a step. "No, no, I cannot, I will not touch you in such a guise as this." "Freya!" the Countess angrily exclaimed, gazing at him as if to detect some trace of insanity in his features. "What does this mean? Have you been in society? In that dress?" he asked in a low tone, as if ashamed for her. "Yes, and in my impatience to hasten to you, I did not stop to change it. I thought you would be pleased." Freya again burst into the bitter laugh from which she always shrank. "Pleased when I see that you show yourself to others so—" "How?" she asked, still failing to understand him. "So naked," he burst forth, unable to control himself longer. "You have uncovered your beauty thus before the eyes of the gentlemen of your world. And this is my wife, a creature so destitute of all shame." "Freya!" shrieked the Countess, tottering backward with her hand pressed upon her brow as if she had just received a blow on the head. "This to me, today, or tomorrow." "On any day when you display the beauty at which I scarcely dare to glance, to the profane eyes of a motley throng of strangers who gaze with the same satisfaction at the booths of a fair. On any day when you expose to greedy looks the bosom which conceals the heart that should be mine, on any such day you are unworthy the love of any honest man." A low cry of indignation answered him, then all was still. At last Madeleine von Wildenau's lips murmured with a violent effort, "This is the last." Freya was striving to calm himself. He pressed his burning brow against the frosty window panes with their glittering tangle of crystal flowers and stars. The sparkling firmament above gazed down in its eternal clearness upon the poor earthling, who in his childlike way was offering a sacrifice to the chaste god, whose cold home it was. "Whenever I come, there is always some new torture for me. But you have never so insulted and outraged me as today," said the Countess slowly, in a low tone, as if weighing every word. Her manner was terribly calm and cold. "I understand that it may be strange to you to see a lady in full dress. You have never moved in a circle where this is a matter of course and no one thinks of it. To the pure all things are pure, and he who is not stands with us under the law of the etiquette of our society. Our village lasses must muffle themselves to the throat, for what could protect them from the coarse jests and rudeness of the village lads?" Freya winced. He felt the lash. "To add to the splendour of festal garments," she went on, "a little of the natural beauty of the divinely created human body is a tribute which even the purest woman can afford the eye, and whatever is kept within the limits of the artistic sense can never be shameless or unseemly. Woe betide anyone who passes these bounds and sees evil in it. He erases himself from the ranks of cultured people. So much and no more you are still worthy that I should say in my own justification." She turned and took up the cloak to wrap herself in it. "Will you be kind enough to have the horses harnessed?" "Are you going?" asked Freya, who meanwhile had regained his self-control. "Yes." "Alas, what have I done?" he said, wringing his hands. "I have not even asked you to sit down, have not let you rest, have offended and wounded you. Oh, I am a savage, a wretched man." "You are what you can be," she replied with the cutting coldness into which a proud woman's slighted love is quickly transformed. "What such an uncultivated person can be. That is what you wish to say," replied Freya. "But there lies my excuse. I am a native of the country, accustomed to break my fruit, wet with the morning dew, from the tree ere any hand has touched it, or pluck from the thorny boughs in the dewy thicket the hidden berries which no human eye has beheld. I cannot understand how people can enjoy fruits that have been uncovered for hours in the dust of the marketplace. The aroma is gone. The freshness and bloom have vanished, and if given me, no matter how costly it might be, I should not care for it. The wild berries in the wood which smiled at me from the leafy dusk with their glittering dewdrops would please me 1,000 times better. This is not meant for a comparison, only an instance of how people feel when they live in the country. And to carry your simile further, if you believe that the fruit so greatly desired has been kept for you alone, would it not please you to possess what others long for in vain?" "No," he said simply, "I am not envious enough to wish to deprive others of anything they covet, but I will not share, so I would rather resign." "Well then, I have nothing more to say on that point. Let us close the conversation." Both were silent a long time, as if exhausted by some great exertion. "How is the child? Have you any news from Josepha?" the Countess asked at last. "Yes, but unfortunately nothing good." "As usual," she answered hastily. "It is her principle to make us anxious. Such people take advantage of every opportunity to let us feel their power. I know that." "I do not think so. I must defend my cousin." "She was always honest, though blunt and impulsive," answered Freya. "I fear she is writing the truth, and the boy is really worse." "Go there then if you are anxious, and send me word how you find him. I will not travel at your expense, except in your service, and my own means are not enough," replied Freya in a cold, stern tone. "Very well, this is in my service, so obey and go at my expense." Freya gazed at her long and earnestly. "As your steward?" he asked in a peculiar tone. "I should like to have a truthful report, not a biased one, as is Josepha's custom," she replied evasively. "There is nothing to be done on the estates now. I beg the steward to represent my interests in this matter. If you find the child really worse, I will get a leave of absence and go to him." "But have the horses harnessed now, or it will be morning before I return. Will it not be too fatiguing for you to return tonight? Shall I not wake the housemaid to prepare your room and wait on you?" "No, I thank you." "As you choose," he said, quietly going to order the horses, which had hardly been taken from the carriage, to be harnessed again. The coachman remonstrated, saying that the animals had not had time to rest, but Freya replied that there must be no opposition to the Countess's will. The half-hour which the coachman required was spent by the husband and wife in separate rooms. Freya was arranging on his desk a file of papers relating to his business as steward, bills and documents for the Countess to look over. He worked as quietly as if all emotion was dead within him. The Countess sat alone in the dimly lighted, comfortless sitting-room, gazing at the spot where her son's bed used to stand. Her blood was seething with shame and wrath, yet the sight of the empty wall where the boy no longer held out his arms to her from the little couch was strangely sad, as if he were dead and his corpse had already been borne out. Her heart was filled with grief, too bitter to find relief in tears. They are frozen at such a moment. She would fain have called his name amid loud sobs, but something seemed to stand beside her, closing her lips and clutching her heart with an iron hand, the vengeance of the sorely insulted woman. Then she fancied she saw the child fluttering toward her in his little white shirt. At the same moment a door burst open. A draught of air swept through the room, making her start violently. And at the same moment a star shot from the sky, so close at hand that it appeared as if it must dart through the panes and join its glittering fellows on the Countess' breast. What was that? a gust of wind so sudden that it swept through the closed rooms, burst doors open, and appeared to hurl the stars from the sky. Yet outside all was still, only the wainscoting and beams of the room creaked slightly. Popular superstition would have said, some death has been announced. The excited woman thought of it with secret terror. Was it the whir of the spindle from which one of the fates had just cut the thread of life? If it were the life thread of her child, if at that very hour her blood congealed to ice. She longed to shriek in her fright, but again the gloomy genius of vengeance sealed her lips and heart. If it were, God's will be done. Then the last bond between her and Freya would be sundered. What could she do with this man's child? Nothing that fettered her to him had a right to exist. If the child was dead, then she would be free. There would be nothing more in common between them. He had slain her heart that day, and she was slaying the last feeling which lived within it, love for her child. Everything between them must be over, effaced from the earth, even the child. Let God take it. Every passionate woman who is scorned feels the touch of kinship with Medea, whose avenging steel strikes the husband whom it cannot reach through the children, whether her own heart is also pierced or not. Greater far than the self-denial of love is that of hate, for it extends to self-destruction. It fears no pain, spares neither itself nor its own flesh and blood, slays the object of its dearest love to give pain to others, even if only in thought, as in the modern realm of culture, where everything formerly expressed in deeds of violence now acts in the sphere of mental life. It was a terrible hour. From every corner of the room, wherever she gazed, the boy's large eyes shone upon her through the dusk, pleading, "Forgive my father, and do not thrust me from your heart." But in vain, her wrath was too great. Her heart was incapable at that moment of feeling anything else. Everything had happened as it must. She had entered an alien, inferior sphere, and abandoned and scorned her own. Therefore the society to which she belonged now exiled her, while she reaped in the sphere she had chosen ingratitude and misunderstanding. Now, too late, she was forced to realize what it meant to be chained for life to an uneducated man. "Oh God, my punishment is just," murmured an angry voice in her soul. "In my childish defiance I despised all the benefits of culture by which I was surrounded, to make for myself an idol of clay, which, animated by my glowing breath, dealt me a blow in the face and returned to its original element. I have thrown myself away on a man, to whom any peasant lass would be dearer. Why, O God, hast thou lured me with thy deceitful mask into the mire? Dost thou feel at ease amid base surroundings? I cannot follow thee there. A religion which stands on so bad a footing with man's highest blessings, culture and learning, can never be mine. Is it divine to steal a heart under the mask of Christ, and then, as if in mockery, leave the deceived one in the lurch, after she has been caught in the snare and bound to a narrow-minded, brutal husband? Is this godlike? Nay, it is fiendish. Do not look at me so beseechingly, beautiful eyes of my child. I no longer believe even in you. Everything which has hitherto bound me to your father has been a lie. You, too, are an embodied falsehood. It is not true that Countess Wildenau has mingled her noble blood with that of a low-born man, that she has given birth to a bastard, wretched creature, which could be at home in no sphere save by treachery. No, I cannot have forgotten myself so far. It is but a dream, a fantasy of the imagination, and when I awake it will be on the morning of that August day in Ammergau after the Passion play. Then I shall be free, can wed a noble man who is my peer, and give him legitimate heirs, whose mother I can be without a blush. What was that? Did her ears deceive her? The hoof-beats of a horse, rushing up the mountain with the speed of the wind. She hurried to the window. The clock was just striking 2. Yes! A figure like the wild huntsman was flitting like a shadow through the night toward the castle. Now he turned the last curve and reached the height, and the Countess saw distinctly that he was her courtier. What news was he bringing? What had happened at so late an hour? Was the evil dream not yet over? What new blow was about to strike her? What you desired? Nothing else, said the demon of her life. The courier checked his foaming horse before the terrace. The Countess tried to hurry toward him, but could not leave the spot. She clung shuddering to the crossbars of the window, which cast its long black shadow far outside. Freya opened the door. Madeline heard the horseman ask, "Is the Countess here?" "Yes," replied Freya. "I have a telegram which must be signed. The answer is prepaid." Freya tore off the envelope. Take the horse round to the stable, I will attend to everything. He entered and approached the door, through which the child had come to his mother's aid the last time she was there, to protect her from Josepha. The Countess fancied that the little head must be again thrust in, but it was only Freya with the dispatch. The Countess mechanically signed her name to the receipt, as if she feared she could not do so after having read the message. Then, with a trembling hand, she opened the telegram, which contained only the words, "Our angel has just died," with his mother's name on his lips. "Please send directions for the funeral. Josepha." A cry rang through the room like the breaking of a cord. A death-like silence followed. The Countess was on her knees, with her face bowed on the table, her hand clasping the telegram, crushed before the God whose might she felt for the first time in her life, whom only a few moments before she had blasphemed and defied. He had taken her at her word, and her words had condemned her. The child, the loyal child who had died with her name on his lips, she had wished but a few minutes before that God would take out of the world. She could betray him for the sake of an aristocratic legitimate brother who never had existed. She could think of his death as something necessary, as her means of deliverance. Now the child had released her. Sensitive and modest, he had removed the burden of his poor little life, which was too much for her to bear, and vanished from the earth where he found no place. But his last word was the name of all love, the name Mother. He had not asked, "Have you fulfilled a mother's duties to me? Have you loved me?" He had loved his mother with that sweet child love which demands nothing, only gives. And she, the avaricious mother, had been niggardly with her love, till the child died of longing. She had let it die, and did not bestow the last joy, press the last kiss upon the little mouth, permit the last look of the seeking eyes to rest upon the mother's face. Outraged nature, so long denied, now shrieked aloud, like an animal for its dead young. But the brute has at least done its duty, suckled its offspring, warmed and protected it with its own body as long as it could. But she, the more highly organized creature, for only human beings are capable of such unnatural conduct, had sacrificed her child to so-called higher interests, had neither heeded Josepha's warning nor the voice of her own heart. Now came pity for the dead child. Now she would fain have taken it in her arms, called it by every loving name, cradled the weary little head upon her breast. Too late! He had passed away like a smiling good genius whom she had repulsed. Now she was alone and free, but free like the man who falls into a chasm because the rope which bound him to the guide broke. She had not known that she possessed a child while he lived. Now that he was dead, she knew it. Maternal joy could not teach her, for she had never experienced it. Maternal grief did, and she was forced to taste it to the dregs. Though she writhed in her torture, burying her nails in the carpet as if she would fain dig the child from the ground, she could find no consolation, and letting her head sink despairingly, she murmured, "My child, you have gone and left me with a guilt that can never be atoned. You can be my mother in heaven," he had once said. This too was forfeited. Neither in heaven nor on earth had she a mother's rights, for she had denied her child, not only before the world, but during this last hour, to herself also. Freya bore the dispensation differently. To him it was no punishment, but a trial, the inevitable consequence of unhappy, unnatural relations. He could not reproach himself, and uttered no reproaches to others. He was no novice in suffering, and had one powerful consolation, which she lacked, the perception of the divinity of grief. This made him strong and calm. Freya leaned against the window and gazed upward to the stars, which were so peacefully pursuing their course. "You were far away from me when you lived in a foreign land, my child. Now you are near, my poor little boy. This cold earth had no home for you, but to your father you will still live, and your glorified spirit will brighten my path. The dark one I must still follow." Tears flowed silently down his cheeks. No loud lamentations must profane his great, sacred anguish. With clasped hands he mutely battled it down, and as of old on the cross, his eyes appealed to those powers ever near the patient sufferer in the hour of conflict. However insignificant and inexperienced he might be in this world, he was proportionally lofty and superior in the knowledge of the things of another. "Come, rise," he said gently to the bewildered woman, bending to help her. She obeyed, but it was in the same way that two strangers, in a moment of common disaster, lend each other assistance. The tie had been severed that day, and the child's death placed a grave between them. "I fear your sobbing will be heard downstairs. Will you not pray with me?" said Freya. "Do what we may, We are in God's hands and must accept what he sends. I wish that you could feel how the saints aid a soul which suffers in silence. Loud outcries and unbridled lamentations drive them away. God does not punish us to render us impatient, but patient." He clasped his hands. "Come, let us pray for our child," he repeated in a low tone the usual familiar prayers for the dying. We cannot always command words to express our feelings. An old formula often stands us in good stead, when the agitation of our souls will not suffer us to find language, and our thoughts, swept to and fro by the tempest of feeling, gladly cling to a familiar form to which they give new life. The Countess did not understand this. She was annoyed by the commonplace phraseology, which was not hallowed to her by custom and piety. She was contemptuous of a point of view which could find consolation for such a grief by babbling trivialities. Freya ended his prayer and remained a moment with his hands clasped on his breast. Then he dipped his fingers in the holy water basin beside the place where the child's couch had formerly stood and made the sign of the cross over himself and the unresponsive woman. She submitted, but winced as if he had cut her face with a knife and destroyed its beauty. It reminded her of the hour in Amergau when he made the sign of the cross over her for the first time. Then she had felt enrolled by this symbol in a mysterious army of sufferers, and there her misery began. "We must now arrange where we will have the child buried," said Freya. "I think we should bring him here, that we may still have our angel's grave." "As you choose," she said in an exhausted tone, wiping away her tears. "It will be best for you to go and attend to everything yourself. Then you can bring the body." The word again destroyed her composure. She saw the child in his coffin with Josepha, the faithful servant who had nursed him, beside it, and an unspeakable jealousy seized her concerning the woman to whom she had so indifferently resigned all her rights. The child, always so ready to lavish its love, was lying cold and rigid, and she would give her life if it could rise once more, throw its little arms around her neck and say, "My dear mother." "Pearl of heaven, I have cast you away for wretched tinsel, and now, when the angels have taken you again, I recognize your value." She tore the jewels from her breast. "There, take these glittering stars of my frivolous life and put them in his coffin. I never want to see them again. Let their rays be quenched in my child's grave." "The sacrifice comes too late," said Freya, pushing the stones away. He did not wish to be harsh, but he could not be untruthful. What was a handful of diamonds flung away in a moment of impulse to the Countess Wildenau? Did she seek to buy with them pardon for her guilt toward her dead child? The father's aching heart could not accept that payment on account, or was it meant for the symbol of a greater sacrifice, a sacrifice of her former life? Then it came too late for the dead and for the living. It could not avail the former, and the latter no longer believed in it. She had understood him and the terrible accusation which he unwittingly brought against her. Standing before him as if before a judge, she felt that God was with him at that moment. But she was deserted, her angel had left her, there was no pity for her in heaven or on earth, save from one person. The thought illumined the darkness of her misery. There was but one who would pour balm upon her wounds, one who had indulgence and love enough to raise the drooping head, pardon the criminal, her noble, generous-hearted friend, the prince. She would fly to him, seek shelter from the gloomy spirit which had pursued her ever since she conjured up in Amergau the cruel god who asked such impossible things and punished so terribly. "Pray, order the carriage. I must leave here or I shall die." Freya glanced at the clock. "The half-hour Martin required is over. He will be here directly." "Is it only half an hour? Oh, God! Is it possible? So much misery in half an hour. It seems an eternity since the news came." "We can feel more grief in one moment than pleasure in 1,000 years," answered Freya. "It is probably because a just providence allots to each an equal measure of joy and pain. But the pain must be experienced in this brief existence, while we have an eternity for joy. Woe betide him who does the reverse, keeps the pain for eternity and squanders the joy in this world. He is like the foolish virgins who burned their oil before the coming of the bridegroom." The Countess nodded. She understood the deep significance of Freya's words. "But we of the people say that whom God loveth, he chasteneth," he continued, "and I interpret that to mean that he compels those whom he wishes to save to bear their portion here below, that the joy may be reserved for them in heaven. To such favoured souls he sends an angel with the cup of wormwood, and wherever it flees and hides, he finds it." Nearer and nearer the angel circles around it on his dark pinions, till it sinks with fatigue, and fainting with thirst like the Saviour on the cross, drinks the bitter draught as if it were the most delicious refreshment. The Countess gazed into his face with timid admiration. He seemed to her the gloomy messenger of whom he spoke. She fancied she could hear the rustle of his wings as he drew nearer and nearer in ever-narrowing circles, till escape was no longer possible. Like a hunted animal she took to flight, seeking deliverance at any cost. Thank heaven the carriage. Martin was driving up. A cold "Farewell, I hope you may gain consolation and strength for the sad journey," was murmured to the father who was going to bring home the body of his dead child. Then she entered the carriage. Freya wrapped the fur robe carefully around the delicate form of his wife, but not another word escaped his lips. What he said afterward to his God, when he returned to the deserted house, Countess Wildenau must answer for at some future day. Chapter 23. Noli me tangere. I have attracted you by a play, for you were a child, and children are taught by games. But when one method of instruction is exhausted, it is cast aside and exchanged for a higher one, that the child may ripen to maturity. Thus spoke the voice of the heavenly teacher to the Countess as, absorbed in her grief, she drove through the dusk of a wintry morning. She almost wondered, as she gazed out into the grey dawn, that the day-star was not weary of pursuing its course. Aye, the mysterious voice spoke the truth. The play was over. That method of instruction was exhausted, but she did not yet feel ready for a sterner one, and trembled at the thought of it. Instead of the divine kindergarten instructor, came the gloomy teacher Death, forcing the attention of the refractory pupil by the first pitiless blow upon her own flesh and blood. Day was dawning, in nature as well as in her own soul, but the sun shone upon a winding sheet, outside as well as in, a world dead in the clasp of winter. Where was the day when the redeeming love for which she hoped would appear to her in the spring garden? Woe to all who believed in spring. Their best gift was a cold winter sunlight on snow-covered graves. The corpse of her spring dream was lying on the laughing shores of the Riviera. The God whom she sought was very different from the one she intended to banish from her heart. The new teacher seized her hand with bony fingers and forced her to look closely at the God whom she herself had created, and whom she now upbraided with having deceived her. "What kind of God would this creature of your imagination be?" rang in her ears with pitiless mockery. Aye, she had believed him to be the Jupiter who loved mortal women. Only in the course of the ages he had changed his name, and now appeared as Christ. But she was now forced to learn that he was no offspring of the sensual fancy of the nations, but a contrast to every natural tendency and desire, a true God, not a creation of mankind. Were it not so, men would have invented a more complaisant one. Must not that be a divine power which, in opposition to all human, all earthly passions, with neither splendour nor power, with the most insignificant means has established an empire throughout the world? Aye, she recognized with reverent awe that this was a God, though unlike the one whom she sought, Christ was not Jupiter, and Freya was not Christ. The latter cannot be clasped in the arms, does not yield to earthly yearning, no matter how fervently devout. Spirit as he is, he vanishes, even where he reveals himself in material form, and whoever thinks to grasp him holds but the poor doll, whom he gave for a momentary support to the childish mind, which seeks solely what is tangible. Mary Magdalene was permitted to serve and anoint him when he walked on earth in human form, but when she tried to clasp the risen Lord, the Noli me tangere thundered in her ears, and God withdrew from mortal touch. In Mary Magdalene, however, the love kindled by the visible Master was strong enough to burn on for the invisible one. She no longer sought him among the living, but went into solitude and lived for the vanished Christ. But the Countess had not advanced so far. What God of love was this, who imposed conditions which made the warm blood freeze, killed the warm life pulses? What possession was this, which could only be obtained by renunciation? What joy that could be attained solely by mortification? Her passionate nature could not comprehend this contradiction. She longed to clasp his knees and wipe his feet with her hair. At least that, nothing more, only that. She would be modest. But not even that was allowed her. This was the great impulse of religious materialism, in which divinity and humanity met, the Magdalene element in the history of the conversion of mankind, which attracted souls like that of Wilhelmine von Hillern, made them feel for an instant the bliss of the immediate presence of God, and then left them disappointed and alone until they perceived that in that one instant wings have grown strong enough to bear them up to heaven, if they once learned to use them. Thus quivering and forsaken, the heart of the modern Magdalene lay on the earth when the first Noli Me Tangere echoed in her ears. She had never known that there were things which could not be had, and now that she wanted a God and could not obtain him, she murmured like a child which longs in vain for the stars until it attains a higher consciousness of ownership than lies in mere personal possession, the feeling which in quiet contemplation of the starry firmament fills us with the proud consciousness. This is yours. Everything is ours, and nothing, according to our view of it. To expand our breasts with its mighty thoughts, to merge ourselves in it and revel in the whirling dance of the atoms. In that sense the universe is ours. But absorb and contain it we cannot. In that way it does not belong to us. It is the same with God. Greatness cannot enter littleness. The small must be absorbed by the great, but its power of possession lies in the very fact that it can do this and still retain its own nature. How long will it last, and what will it cost, ere the impatient child attains the peace of this realization? In the faint glimmer of the dawn, the Countess drove past a little church in the suburbs of Munich. It was the hour for early mass. A few sleepy, shivering old women, closely muffled, were shuffling over the snow in big felt shoes toward the open door. A dim ray of light streamed out, no organ notes, no festal display lured worshippers, for it was a low mass. It was cold and gloomy outside, songless within, yet the Countess suddenly stopped the carriage. "I am going into the church a moment," she said, tottering forward with uncertain steps, for she was exhausted both physically and mentally. The old women eyed her malignantly, as if asking, "What do you want among poor ugly crones who drag their crooked limbs out of bed so early to go to their Saviour, because later they must do the work of their little homes and cannot get away? What brings you to share with us the bitter bread of poverty, the bread of the poor in spirit, with which our Saviour fed the 5,000 and will feed thousands and tens of thousands more from eternity to eternity? Of what use to you are the crumbs scattered here for a few beggars?" She felt ashamed as she moved in her long velvet train and costly fur cloak past the cowering figures, redolent of the musty straw beds and close sleeping rooms whence they had come, and read these questions on the wrinkled faces peering from under woolen hoods and caps, as if she, the rich woman, had come to take something from the poor. She had gone forward to the empty front benches near the altar, where the timid common people do not venture to sit, but, she knew not why, as she was about to kneel there, she suddenly felt that she could not cut off a view of any part of the altar from the people behind, deprive them of anything to which she had no right, and turning she went back to the last seat. There, behind a trembling old man in a shabby woolen blouse, who could scarcely bend his stiff knees and sat coughing and gasping, and a consumptive woman who was passing the beads of her rosary between thin, crooked fingers, she knelt down. She was more at ease now. She felt that she had no rights here, that she was the least among the lowliest. The church was still dark. It had not yet been lighted. The sacristan was obliged to be saving. Everyone knew that. The faint ray which streamed through the door came from the candle ends brought by the congregation, who set them in front of the praying desks to read their prayer books. The first person was compelled to use a match. The others lighted their candles from his and were glad to be able to save the matches. It was a silent agreement, which everyone knew. Here and there a tiny light glowed brightly. Ever and anon in some dark corner, the slight snap of a match was heard, and directly after a column or the image of some saint emerged from the wavering shadows, now fainter, now more distinct, according as the light flashed up and down, till it burned clearly. Then the nave grew bright, and the breath of the congregation rose through the cold church over the little flames like clouds of incense. The high altar alone still lay veiled in darkness. The light of a wax candle on the bench in front shone brightly into the Countess's eyes. The woman in the three-cornered kerchief with the sunken temples and bony hands glanced back and gazed mournfully, almost reproachfully, into her face and at her rich fur cloak. Madeleine von Wildenau was ashamed of her beauty, ashamed that she wore furs while the woman in front of her scarcely had her shoulders covered. She felt burdened. She almost wanted to excuse herself. If she were poor also, she would have no cause to be ashamed. She gently drew out her purse and slipped the contents into the woman's hand. The latter drew back startled. She could not believe, could not understand that she was really to take it, that the lady was in earnest. "May God reward you." "I'll pray for you 1,000 times," she whispered, and a great, unutterable emotion filled the Countess's soul as she met the poor woman's grateful glance. Then the kneeling crone nudged her neighbour, the coughing, stammering old man, and pressed a gold coin into his hand. "There's something for you. You're poor and needy too." The latter looked at the woman, who was a stranger, as though she were an apparition from another world. "Why, what is this?" he murmured with difficulty. "The lady behind gave it to me," said the woman, pointing backward with her thumb. The old man nodded to the lady, as well as his stiff neck would permit, and the woman did not notice that he ought to have thanked her, as the money was given to her, and she had voluntarily shared it with him. Countess Wildenau experienced a strange emotion of satisfaction, as if now, for the first time, she had a right here, and with the gift she had purchased her share of the bread of poverty. At last there was a movement near the high altar. A sleepy alkalite shuffled in, made his reverence before it, and lighted a candle, which would not burn because he did not wait till the wax, which was stiffened by the cold, had melted. While he was lighting the second, the first went out, and he was obliged to begin his task anew. The wand wavered to and fro a long time in the boy's numb hands, but at last the altar was lighted. The boy bowed again, and went down the stone steps into the vestry room. This was ordinary prose, but the devout worshippers did not perceive it. They all knew the wondrous spell of fire with which the Catholic Church consecrates candles and gives their light the power to scatter the princes of darkness, and rejoiced in the victorious rays from which the evil spirits fled. They saw their gliding shadows dart in wild haste through the church, and the sleepy boy who had wrought the miracle by means of his lighter disappear. The light shines, no matter who kindles it. The poor dark souls, illumined by no ray of earthly hope, eagerly absorbed its cheering rays, and so long as the consecrated candles burned, the ghosts of care, discord, envy, and all the other demons of poverty were spellbound. Now the priest entered, clad in his white robes, accompanied by 2 attendants. A death-like stillness reigned throughout the church. In a low, almost inaudible whisper, he read the Latin text, which no one understood, but whose meaning everyone knew, even the Countess. Everything which gives an impulse to the independent activity of the soul produces more effect than what is received in a complete form. During the incomprehensible muttering, the Countess had time to recall the whole mighty drama, to which it referred better and more vividly than any distinct prosaic theological essay could have described it. Again she experienced all the horrors of the Passion, as she had done in the Passion play, only this time invisibly instead of visibly, spiritually instead of materially. Noli me tangere. The priest stooped and kissed the altar. It meant the Judas kiss. "Can you kiss those lips and not fall down to worship?" cried a voice in the Countess's heart, as it had done 9 years before, and a nameless longing seized upon her for the divine contact which had fallen to the traitor's lot. But Noli me tangere rang in the ears of the penitent Magdalene. Before her stood an altar and a priest, not Christ nor Judas, and the kiss she envied was imprinted upon white linen, not the Saviour's lips. She pressed her hands upon her heart, and a few bitter tears oozed from beneath her drooping lashes. She was like the blind princess in Henrik Hertz's wonderful poem, who, when she suddenly obtained her sight, no longer knew herself among the objects which she had formerly recognized only by touch, and fancied that she had lost everything which was dear and familiar, because she had gained a new sense which she knew not how to use, a higher one than that of her groping fingertips. Then in her fear she turned to the invisible world, and recognized it only. It alone had not changed with outward phenomena, because alike to the blind, and those who had sight it, revealed itself only to the mind. It was the same with the Countess. The world which she could touch with her fingers had vanished, and before her newly awakened sense lay a boundless space filled with strange forms, which all seemed so unattainably distant. One only remained the same, the God whom she had never seen. And now, when everything once familiar and near was transformed and removed to a vast distance, when everything appeared under a wholly different guise, it was he to whom her heart, accustomed to blindness, sought and found the way. The priest was completely absorbed in his prayer book. What he beheld the others felt with mysterious awe. It was like looking through a telescope into a strange world, while those who were not permitted to do so stood by and imagined what the former beheld. The sursum corda fell slowly from the lips of the priest. The bell sounded. "Christ is present!" The congregation, as if dazzled, bowed their faces and crossed themselves in the presence of the marvel that heaven itself vouchsafed to descend to their unworthy selves. Again the bell sounded for the transformation, and perfect silence followed, while the miracle was being wrought by which God entered the mouths of mortals to be the bread of life to mankind. This was the bread of the poor and simple-hearted, whose crumbs the Countess Wildenau had that day stolen and was eating with secret shame. The Mass was over. The priest pronounced the benediction and withdrew to the vestry room. The people put out their bits of wax candles. Clouds of light smoke filled the church. It was like Christmas Eve, after the children have gone to bed and the candles on the tree are extinguished, but their hearts are still full of Christmas joy. The Countess knew not why the thought entered her mind, but she suddenly recollected that Christmas was close at hand, and she no longer had any child on whom she could bestow gifts. True, she had never done this herself, but always left Josepha to attend to the matter. This year, however, she had thought she would do it. Now it was too late. Suddenly she saw a child's eyes gazing happily at a lighted tree, and below it a manger, with the same eyes sparkling back. The whole world, heaven and earth, were glittering with children's beaming eyes, but the most beautiful of all, those of her own boy, were closed. No grateful glance smiled upon her amid the universal joy. For her there was no Christmas, for it was the Mother's Day, and she was not a mother. Child in the manger, bend down to the sinner who mourns neglected love at thy feet. Sinking on the kneeling bench, she sobbed bitterly. It was dark and silent. The congregation had gone. The candles on the altar had been extinguished as fast as possible. The ever-burning lamp cast dull red rays upon the altar. Dawn was glimmering through the frost-covered window panes. All was still. Only in the distance the cocks were crowing. Again she remembered that evening when her father came, and she had knelt with Friar in the church before the Pietà, until the crowing of the cock reminded her how easy it was to betray love and fidelity. Rising wearily from her knees, she dragged herself to a Pietà above a side altar, and pressed her lips upon the wounds of the divine body. She gazed to see if the eyes would not once more open, but it remained rigid and lifeless. This time no echo answered the mute pleading of the warm lips. No second miracle was wrought for her. The hand which guided her had been withdrawn, and like the poorest and most humble mortal, she was forced to grope her way wearily along the arid path of tradition. It was just, she had deserved nothing better, and the great discovery which came to her that day was that this path also led to God. While thus absorbed in contemplation, a voice suddenly startled her so that she almost fainted. "What does this mean, Countess? You here at early Mass, in a court train? Are you going to write romances, or live them?" "I have often asked you the question, but never with so much justification as now." Prince Emil was standing before her. She could almost have shrieked aloud in her delight. "Prince, my dear Prince!" "Unfortunately, Prince no longer, but Duke of Metten-Barnheim, in which character I again lay myself at your feet and beg for a continuation of your favour," said the Prince with a touch of humour. Raising her from her knees, he led her into the little corridor of the church. "My father," he went on, "feels so well at Cannes that he wants to spend his old age there in peace, and summoned me by telegram to sign the abdication documents and take the burden of government upon my young shoulders. I was just coming from the station, and, as I drove by, saw your carriage waiting before this poor temple. I stopped and obtained with difficulty from the half-frozen coachman information concerning the place where his mistress was seeking compensation from the ennui of a court entertainment. A romantic episode indeed. A beautiful woman in court dress, weeping and doing penance at 6 o'clock in the morning, among beggars and cripples in a little church in the suburbs. A swearing coachman and 2 horses stiff from the cold waiting outside, and lastly a faithful knight, who comes just at the right time to prevent a moral suicide and save a pair of valuable horses. What more can be desired in our time, in the way of romance? Prince, pardon me, Duke, your mockery hurts me. Yes, I suppose so. You are far too wearied to understand humour. Come, I will take you to the carriage. There, lean on me. You are ill, ma chère Madeleine. You cannot go on in this way. What? You will take holy water, into which heaven knows who has dipped his fingers. Oh, to the pure all things are pure. Fortunately, the doubtful fluid is frozen. Talking on in this way, he led her out into the open air. A keen morning wind from the mountains was sweeping through the streets and cut the Countess's tear-stained face. She involuntarily hid it on the Duke's breast. The latter put his arm gently around her and lifted her into the carriage. His own coachman was waiting near, But the Duke looked at her beseechingly. "May I go with you? I cannot possibly leave you in this state." The Countess nodded. He motioned to his servant to drive home and entered the Wildenau equipage. "First of all, Madeline," he said, warming her cold hands in his, "tell me, are you already a saint, or do you wish to become one? Whence dates this last caprice of my adored friend?" "No saint, Duke, neither now nor ever, only a deeply humbled, contrite heart, which would fain fly from this world. But is this world so unlovely that one would fain try heaven, while there are people who can be relied on under any circumstances?" "Yes," replied the Countess bitterly, but the sweetness of the true warmth of feeling revealed through her friend's humour was reviving and strengthening to her brain and heart. In his society it seemed as if there was neither pain nor woe on earth, as if all gloomy spirits must flee from his unruffled calmness. His apparent coldness produced the effect of champagne frappe, which, ice-cold when drunk, warms the whole frame. "Oh, thank heaven that you are here. I have missed you sorely," she said from the depths of her soul. "Oh, my friend, what is to be done? I am helpless without you." "So much the better for me if I am indispensable to you. You know that is the goal of my desires. But, dearest friend, you are suffering, and I cannot aid you because I do not know the difficulty. What avail is a physician who cures only the symptoms, not the disease? You are simply bungling about on your own responsibility, and everyone knows that is the worst thing a sick person can do. Consumptives use the hunger, cure, anemics resort to bloodletting. You, my dear Madeline, I think do the same thing. Mortification. When your vital strength is waning, moral bloodletting, while the heart needs food and warmth. What kind of cure is it to be up all night long and wander about in cold churches with the thermometer marking below freezing early in the morning? I should advise you to edit a book on the physiology of the nerves. You are like the man in the fairy tale who wanted to learn to shiver." An involuntary smile hovered about the Countess's lips. "Duke, your humour is beginning to conquer. No doubt you are right in many things, but you do not know the state of my mind. My life is destroyed. The axe is laid at the root. Happiness, honour, all are lost." "For heaven's sake, what has happened to thus overwhelm you?" asked the Duke, still in the most cheerful mood. She could not tell him the truth and pleaded some incident at court as an excuse. Then in a few words she told him of the Queen's displeasure, the malice of her enemies, her imperilled position. "And do you take this so tragically?" The Prince laughed aloud. "Pardon me, chère amie, but one can't help laughing. A woman like you to despair because a few stiff old court sycophants look askance at you, and the Queen does not understand you, which, with the dispositions you both have, was precisely what might have been expected. It is too comical. It is entirely my own fault. I ought to have considered it, but I expected you to show more feminine craft and diplomacy. That you disdain to employ the petty arts which render one a persona grata at court is only an honour to you, and if a few fops presume to adopt an insolent manner to you, they shall receive a lesson which will teach them that your honour is mime. Nay, it ought to amuse you, to feign death a while, and see how the mice will all come out and dance around you to scatter again when the lioness awakes. Do you talk of destroyed happiness and roots to which the axe is laid? Oh, women, women, you can despair over a plaything. For this position at court could never be aught save a toy to you. But to retire thus in shame and disgrace, would you endure it, if it should happen to you? Ought not a woman to be as sensitive concerning her honour as a man? I don't think your honour will suffer, because the restraint of court life does not suit you. Or is it because you do not understand the Queen? Why, surely persons are not always sympathetic and avoid one another without any regret. Does the fact become so fateful because one of you wears a crown? In that case, I beg you to remember that a crown is hovering over your head also, a crown that is ready to descend whenever that head will receive it, and that you will then be in a position to address Her Majesty as chère cousine. You, a Princess von Frankenberg, a Countess Wildenau, fly like a rebuked child at an ungracious glance from the Queen and her court into a corner of a church. He shook his head. There must be something else. What is it? I shall never learn, but you cannot deceive me. The Countess was greatly disconcerted. She tried to find another plausible pretext for her mood, and, like all natures to whom deception is not natural, said precisely what betrayed her. I am anxious about the Wildenaus. They are only watching for the moment when they can compromise me unpunished, and if the Queen withdraws her favour, they need show me no farther consideration. The Duke frowned. Ah, he said slowly under his breath. What do you fear from the wild nous? How can they compromise you?" The Countess, startled, kept silence. She saw that she had betrayed herself. "Madeleine," he spoke calmly and firmly, "everything must now be clearly understood between us. What connection was there between Wildenau and that mysterious boy? I must know, for I see that that is the quarter whence the danger which you fear is threatening you, and I must know how to avert it. You have just heard that your honour is mine." There was a shade of sternness in his tone, the sternness of an resolve to take this weak, wavering woman under his protection. "The child," she faltered, trembling from head to foot. "Ah, no, there is nothing more to be feared from him. He is dead." "Dead?" asked the Duke gently. "Since when?" "Since yesterday." And the proud Countess, sobbing uncontrollably, sank upon his breast. A long silence followed. The Duke passed his arm around her and let her weep her fill. "My poor Madeleine, I understand everything." An indescribable emotion filled the hearts of both. Not another word was exchanged. The carriage rolled up to the entrance of the Wildenau Palace. Her little cold hands clasped his beseechingly. "Do not desert me," she whispered hurriedly. "Less than ever," he replied gravely and firmly. "Her Highness is ill," he said to the servants who came hurrying out and helped the tottering woman up the steps. She entered the boudoir, where the Duke himself removed her cloak. It was a singular sight. The haughty figure in full evening dress, adorned with jewels, in the light of the dawning day, like some beautiful spirit of the night, left behind by her companions who had fled from the first sunbeams, and now stood terrified, vainly striving to conceal herself in darkness. "Poor wandering sprite, where is the home your tearful eyes are seeking?" said the Prince, overwhelmed by pity as he saw the grief-worn face. "Yes, Madeleine, you are too beautiful for the broad glare of day. Such visions suit the veil of evening, the magical lustre of drawing-rooms. By day one feels as if the night had been robbed of an elf, who, having lost her wings by the morning light, was compelled to stay among common mortals. Carried away by an outburst of feeling, he approached her with open arms. A strange conflict of emotion was seething in her breast. She had longed for him, as for the culture she had despised. She felt that she could not live without him, that without him she could not exercise the spirits she had conjured up to destroy her. Her ear listened with rapture to the expression of love in cultured language. But when he strove to approach her, it seemed as if that unapproachable something which had cried, "Noli me tangere," had established its throne in her own heart since she had knelt among the beggars early that morning, and now, in spite of herself, cried in its solemn dignity from her lips the "Noli me tangere" to another. And, without words, the Duke understood it, respected her mute denial, and reverently drew back a step. "Do you not wish to change your dress? You are utterly exhausted. If it will be a comfort to you to have me stay, I will wait till you have regained your strength. Then I will beg permission to breakfast with you," he said with his wonted calmness. "Yes, I thank you," she answered, with a twofold meaning, and left the room with a bearing more dignified than the Duke had ever seen, as though she had an invisible companion of whom she was proud. Chapter 24. Attempts T.O. rescue. The Countess remained absent a long time, while the Duke sat at the window of the boudoir gazing out into the frosty winter morning, but without seeing what was passing outside. Before him lay a shattered happiness, a marred destiny. The happiness was his, the destiny hers. There is surely nothing weaker than a woman, even the strongest, he thought, shaking his head mournfully. Ought we not to punish this personator of Christ, who used his mask to break into the citadel of our circle and steal what did not belong to him? Sure, how could the poor fellow help it if an eccentric woman out of ennui? Ah, no, we should not think of it. But what is to be done now? Shall I sacrifice this superb creature to an insipid prejudice, because she sacrificed herself and everything else to a childish delusion? Where is the man pure enough to condemn you, because when you give wholly, royally, and in your proud self-forgetfulness fling what others would outweigh with kingly crowns into the lap of a beggar who can offer you nothing in exchange, not even appreciation of your value, which he is too uncultured to perceive? Alas, such a woman, to be thrown away on such a man, and should I not save her? Should I weakly desert her? I, the only person who can forgive because I am the only one who understands her? No. It would be against all the logic of destiny and reason were I to suffer such a life to be wrecked by this religious humbug. What is the use of my cool brain if I lose my composure now? Allons donc. I will bid defiance to fate and to every prejudice, clasp her in my arms, and destroy the divine farce. Such was the train of the Duke's thoughts. But his pale face and joyless expression betrayed what he would not acknowledge to himself, that his happiness was shattered. He gathered up the fragments and tried to join them together, but with the secret grief with which we bear home some loved one who could not be withheld from a dangerous path, knowing that, though the broken limbs may be healed, he can never regain his former strength. "So grave, Duke?" asked a voice which sent the blood to his heart. The Countess had entered, her step unheard on the soft carpet. He started up. "Madeleine, my poor Madeleine, I was thinking of you and your fate." "I have saddened you," she said, clasping her hands penitently. "Oh, no!" He drew the little hands down to his lips, and with a sorrowful smile kissed them. "My cheerfulness can bear some strain, but the malapert must be permitted to be silent sometimes when there are serious matters to be considered. You are too noble to let me feel that you are suffering. Yet I see it. You would not be the man you are if you did not suffer today." The Duke bit his lips. It seemed as if he was struggling to repress a tear. "Sure, we won't be sentimental. You have wept enough today. The world must not see tear-stains on your face. Give me a cup of coffee. I do not belong to the chosen few whom a mortal emotion raises far above all the needs of their mortal husk." The Countess rang for breakfast. The servant brought the dishes ordered into the boudoir, as the dining room was not yet thoroughly heated. In the chimney corner beside the blazing fire, the coffee was already steaming in a silver urn over an alcohol lamp, filling the cosy room with its aroma and musical humming. "How pleasant this is," said the Duke, throwing himself into an armchair beside the grave mistress of the house. "I will pour it myself," she said to the servant, who instantly withdrew. The Countess was now simply dressed in black, without an ornament of any kind, and with her hair confined in a plain knot. "What a contrast," the Duke remarked, smiling. "You alone are capable of such metamorphoses. Half an hour ago in a court costume, glittering with diamonds, an aching heart, and hands half frozen from being clasped in prayer in the chilled church, now a demure little housewife, peacefully watching the coffee steam in a cosy little room, waiting intently for the moment when the water will boil, as if there were no task in the whole world more important than that of making a good decoction." A faint smile glided over the Countess' face. She had nearly allowed the important moment to pass. Now she poured out the coffee, extinguished the spirit lamp, and handed her companion a cup of the steaming beverage. "1,000 thanks. That's enough to brighten the most downcast mood. What comfort! Now let us enjoy an hour of innocent, genuine plebeian happiness. How fortunate the people are who live so every day. I should be the very man to enjoy such bliss." His glance wandered swiftly to the Countess' empty cup. "Aha! I thought so. A great sorrow must of course be observed by mortifying the body, in order to be sure to succumb to it. Well? Then the guest must do the honours of the hostess. There, now, ma chère Madeleine will drink this, and dip this busket into it. One can accomplish that, even without an appetite. Who would wish to make heart and stomach identical?" The Countess, spite of her protestations, was forced to obey. She saw that the Duke had asked for breakfast only to compel her to eat. "There! You see that it can be done. I enjoy with a touch of emotion this coffee which your dear hands have prepared. If you would do the same with the cup I poured out, what a sentimental breakfast it would be." A ray of the old cheerfulness sparkled in the Duke's eyes. "I knew that with you alone I should find peace and cheer," said the Countess, brightening. "So much the better." The Duke lighted a cigarette and leaned comfortably back in his chair. The Countess ordered the coffee equipage to be removed, and then sat down opposite to him with her hands clasped in her lap. "The main point now, my dear Madeleine, if I may be allowed to speak of these things to you, is to release you from the cause of all the trouble. I need not name him. Of course I do not know how easy or how difficult this may be, because I am ignorant how far you are involved in this relation, and unfortunately lack the long locks of the Christ, which would enable me successfully to play the part of the Good Shepherd, who freed the imprisoned lamb from the thicket." "As if it depended on that," said the Countess. "Not at all. Oh, women, women, what will not a few ravenlocks do? The destiny of your lives turns upon just such trifles. Imagine that Amagal Christus with close-cropped hair and a bristling red beard. Would that mask have suited the illusion to which you sacrificed yourself?" "Hardly." The Countess made no reply, silenced by the pitiless truth. but at last she thought she must defend herself. And the religious impression, the elevation, the enthusiasm, the revelations of the Passion play, do you count these nothing? Certainly not. I felt them myself, but believe me, you would not have transferred them to the person if the representative of Christ had worn a wig and the next day had appeared before you with stiff, closely cropped red hair. The Countess made a gesture of aversion. There, now you see the realist again. Yet, say what you will, a few locks of raven hair formed the net in which the haughty, clever Countess Wildenau was prisoned. You may be right. The greatest picture consists of details, and may be spoiled by a single one. I will confess it. Yes. The harmony of the whole person, down to the most trifling detail, with the Christ tradition, enthralled me, and had the locks been wanting, the impression would not have been complete. But, however I may have been deceived in the image, I cannot let myself and him sink so low in your opinion as to permit you to believe that it was nothing save an ensnaring outward semblance which sealed my fate. Had not his spiritual nature completed the illusion, matters would never have gone so far. Yes, I can imagine how it happened. He prompted the poet, and he had skill enough to play to the prompter, as it is called, in the parlance of the stage. Skill is not the right word, he was influenced precisely as I was. Ah, he probably would not have been so foolish as to refuse such a chance. A wealthy, beautiful woman, like you. No, do not speak of him in that way. I cannot let that accusation rest upon him. He is not base. He is uncultured, has the narrow-minded views of a peasant, is sensitive and capricious, an unfortunate temperament with which it is impossible to live happily. But I know no one in the world to whom any ignoble thought is more alien. The prince gazed at her admiringly. Tears were sparkling in her eyes. I don't deny that I am bitterly disappointed in him, but though I love him no longer, I must not allow him to be insulted. He loved me and sacrificed his poor life for mine. That the compensation did not outweigh the price was no fault of his, and I ought not to make him responsible for it. The Duke became very thoughtful. The Countess was silent. She had clasped her hands on her knee and was gazing, deeply moved, into vacancy. "You are a noble woman, Madeleine," he said in a low tone. "I always ranked you high, but never higher than at this moment. I will never again wound your feelings. But however worthy of esteem Freya may be, deeply as I pity the unfortunate man, you are my first consideration. And you must not continue in this relation. Throughout the whole system of the universe, the lower existence must yield to the higher. You are the higher, therefore Freya must be sacrificed. You are a philosopher. Accept the results of your view of the world, be strong and resolve to do what is inevitable quickly. You yourself say that you no longer love him. Whether you have ever done so, I will not venture to decide. If he is really what you describe him to be, he must feel this, and, I believe, that he too is not to be envied. What kind of respite is this which you are granting the hapless man under the sword of the executioner? Pardon me, but I should term it torture. You feign, from motives of compassion, feelings you no longer have, and he feels the deception. So he is continually vibrating between the two extremes of fear and hope, a prey to the most torturing doubts. So you permit the victim whom you wish to kill to live in order to destroy him slowly. You pity him, and for pity are cruel. The Countess cast a startled glance at him. You are terribly truthful. I must say that I am sorry for that man, the Duke went on in his usual manner. I think it is your duty to end this state of things. If he has a good, mentally sound character, he will conquer the blow and shape his life anew. But such a condition of uncertainty would unnerve the strongest nature. This cat-and-mouse sport is unworthy of you. You tried it with me 10 years ago in a less painful way. I, knowing women, was equal to the game, so no harm was done, and I could well allow you the graceful little pastime. It is different with Freya. A man of his stamp, who stakes his whole life upon a single feeling, takes the matter more tragically, and the catastrophe was inevitable. But must romance be carried to tragedy? See, my dear friend, that it is confined within its proper limits. Besides, you have already paid for it dearly enough. It has left an indelible impress upon your soul, borne a fruit which matured in suffering, and you have buried with anguish because destiny itself, though with a stern hand, tried to efface the consequences of your error. Heed this portent, for your sake and his own. I speak in his behalf also. My aim is not only to win you, but to see the woman whom I have won worthy of herself, and the high opinion I cherish of her." The Countess's features betrayed the most intense emotion. What should she do? Should she tell this noble man all? Confess that she was married? The hour that he discovered it, he would desert her. Must she lose him, her last support and consolation? No, she dared not. The drowning woman clung to him. She knew not what was to come of it. She only knew that she would be lost without him, and kept silence. "Where is he? In the old hunting box of which your cousin Wildenau spoke?" asked the Duke after a long pause. "Yes? As what? A steward? Steward? Whom?" The Duke shook his head. "What a relation! You made the man you loved your servant, and believed that you could love him still. How little you knew yourself! Had you seen him on the mountains, battling with wind and storm as a woodcutter, a shepherd, but free, you might have continued to love him. But as the steward, at whom the servants look with one eye as their equal, with the other as their mistress' favourite, never! You placed him in a situation where he could not help despising himself. How could you respect him? But a woman like you no longer loves where she can no longer esteem." He was silent a moment, then with sudden determination exclaimed, "Do you understand what I say now? Not free yourself from him, but free him from himself. You have done the same thing as the giantess who carried the farmer and his plough home in her apron. Do you understand what a deep meaning underlies Chamiso's comical tale? The words with which the old giant ordered her to take her prize back to the spot where she found it say everything. The peasant is no plaything. Only in the sphere where a man naturally belongs is he of value, but this renders him too good for a toy. You have transplanted Freya to a sphere in which he ceased to have any value to you, and are now making him play a part there which I would not impose on my worst enemy. Yes, you are right. Finally, we owe it to those who were once dear to us, not to make them ridiculous. Or do you believe that Freya, if he had the choice, would not have pride enough to prefer the most cruel truth to a compassionate lie? Certainly. And still more. We owe it to the law of truthfulness, under which we stand as moral beings, not to continue deliberately a deception which was perhaps unconsciously begun. When self-respect is lost, all is lost." The Duke rose. "It is time for me to go. Consider my advice. I can say nothing more in your interest and his. But what shall I do? How am I to find a gentle way? Oh, heaven, I don't know how to help myself. Do nothing at present. Everything is still too fresh to venture upon any positive act. The wounds would bleed, and what ought to be severed would only grow together the more firmly. Go away for a time. You are out of favour with the Queen. What is more natural than to go on a journey and sulk? To the so-called steward also, this must at present serve for a pretext to avoid a tragical parting scene. Go now? Now? Leave? You?" she whispered, blushing as she spoke. "Madeleine," he said gently, drawing her hand to his breast. "How am I to interpret this blush? Is it the sign of a sweeter feeling, or embarrassment, because circumstances have led you to say something which I might interpret differently from your intention?" She bent her head, blushing still more deeply. "Perhaps you do not know yourself. I will not torture you with questions which your agitated heart cannot answer now. But if anything really does bind you to me, then I would suggest your joining my father at Cannes. If even the faintest feeling of affection for me is stirring within you, you will understand that we could never be nearer to each other than while you were learning to be my old father's daughter. Will you? Yes," she whispered with rising tears, for ever more beautiful, ever purer rose before her, a happiness which she had forfeited, of which she would no longer be worthy, even could she grasp it. The Duke, usually so sharp-sighted, could not guess the source of these tears. For the first time he was deceived and interpreted favourably an emotion aroused by the despairing perception that all was vain. He gazed down at her with a ray of love shining in his clear blue eyes, and pressed a kiss on her drooping brow. Then raising his hand, he pointed upward. "Only have courage, and hold your head high. All will yet be well. Adieu." He moved away as proudly, calmly and firmly as if success was assured. He did not suspect that he was leaving a lost cause. Chapter 25. D.A.I.S. Dawning. In the quiet chamber in the ancient hunting castle, on the spot formerly occupied by the little bed, a casket now stood on 2 chairs near a wooden crucifix. Freya had returned, bringing the body of his child. He had telegraphed to the Countess, but received in reply only a few lines. She was compelled to set off on a journey at once, her mind was so much affected that her physician had advised immediate change of scene to avert worse consequences. A cheque was enclosed to defray the funeral expenses and bestow a sum on Josepha as a recognition of her faithful service, sufficient to enable her to live comfortably in case she wished to rest. Josepha understood that this was a gracious form of dismissal. But the royal gift which expressed the Countess' gratitude did not avail to subdue the terrible rancour in her soul or the harshness of this dismissal. Morning was dawning. Josepha was changed by illness almost beyond recognition, yet she had watched through the night with Freya beside the coffin. Now she again glanced over the letter which had come the evening before. She doesn't venture to send me away openly and wants to satisfy me with money that I may go willingly. Money, always money. I was forced to give up the child, and now I must lose you too, the last thing I have in the world, she said to Freya, who was sitting silently beside the coffin of his son. Tearing the cheque, she threw it on the floor. There are the fragments. When the child is buried, I know where I shall go. You will not leave here, Josepha, as long as I remain, especially now that you are ill. I have been her servant long enough, but this is the limit where I cease to yield to her caprices. She cannot ask me to give you up also, my relative, the only soul in my boundless solitude. If she did, I would not do it, for, no matter how lowly my birth, I am still her husband, have I no rights whatever. You will stay with me, I desire it, and can do so the more positively as my salary is sufficient to support you. So, you need accept no wages from her. Yes, tell her so. Say that I want nothing, nothing except to stay with you near my angel's grave. Sobs stifled her words. After a time, she continued faintly, I shall not trouble her long, you can see that. Oh, Josepha, don't fancy such things. You are young and will recover, said Freya consolingly, but his eyes rested anxiously upon her. She shook her head. The child was younger still, yet he died of longing for his mother, and I shall die of the yearning for him. Then let me send for a doctor. You cannot go on in this way. Oh, pray, don't make any useless ado. It would only be one person more to question me about the child, and I shall be on thorns while I am deceiving him. You know I never could lie in my life. Leave me in peace. No doctor can help me. Someone rang. Josepha opened the door. The cabinet-maker was bringing in a little coffin, which was to take the place of the box containing the leaden casket. Her black dress and haggard face gave her the semblance of a mother mourning her own child. Nothing was said during the performance of the work. Josepha and Freya lifted the metal casket from the chest and placed it in the plain oak coffin. The man was paid and left the room. Freya hastened out and shook the snow from some pine branches to adorn the bier. A few icicles which still clung to them thawed in the warm room, and the drops fell on the coffin, the tears of the forest. The last scion of the princely house of Prankenberg lay under frost-covered pine boughs, and a peasant mourned him as his son. A maidservant prepared him for his eternal rest. This is the bloodless revolution sometimes accomplished amid the ossified traditions of rank, which affords the insulted idea of universal human rights moments of loving satisfaction. The two mourners were calm and quiet. They seemed to have a premonition that this moment possessed a significance which raised it far above personal grief. An hour later the pastor came. A few men and maidservants formed the funeral procession. Not far from the castle, in the wood, stood a ruinous old chapel. The Countess had permitted the child to be buried there because the churchyard was several leagues away. It is a great deal of honour for Josepha's child to be placed in the chapel of a noble family, thought the people. If haughty old Count Wildenau knew it, he would turn in his grave. The coffin was raised and borne out of the castle. Josepha, leaning on Freya, followed silently with fixed, tearless eyes and burning cheeks. Yet she succeeded in wading through the snow and standing on the cold stone floor in the chilly chapel beside the grave. But when she returned home, the measure of her strength was exhausted. Her labouring lungs panted for breath, her icy feet could not be warmed, her heart, throbbing painfully, sent all the blood to her brain, which burned with fever, while her thoughts grew confused. The terrible chill completed the work of destruction commenced by grief. Freya saw it with unutterable sorrow. I must get a doctor, he said gently. Come, Josepha, don't stare steadily at the empty space where the body lay. Come, I will take you to my room and put you on the bed. Everything there will not remind you of the boy. No, I will stay here, she said, with that cruelty to herself, peculiar to sick persons who do not fear death. Just here, she clung to the uncomfortable sofa on which she sat as if afraid of being dragged away by force. Freya hastily removed the chairs which had supported the coffin, the crucifix, and the candles. "Yes, put them out. You will soon need them for me. Oh, you kind-hearted man, if only you could have the happiness you deserve. You merited a better fate. Ah, I will not speak of what she has done to me, but her sins against you and the child nothing can efface, nothing." A fit of coughing almost stifled her. But it seemed as if her eyes continued to utter the words she had not breath to speak. A feverish vengeance glittered in their depths which made Freya fairly shudder. "Josepha," he said mildly but firmly, "sacrifice your hate to God and be merciful. If you love me, you must forgive her whom I love and forgive." "Never," gasped Josepha with a violent effort. "Joseph, oh, this pain in my chest, I believe it is inflammation of the lungs. Alas, and there is no one to send for the doctor. The men are all in the woods. Go to bed, I beg you. There is not a moment to be lost. I must get the doctor myself. I will send the housemaid to you. Keep up your courage. I will be as quick as I can." And he hurried off, forgetting his grief for his child in his anxiety about the last companion of his impoverished life. The housemaid came in and asked if she could do anything, but Josepha wanted no assistance. The anxious girl tried to persuade her to go to bed, but Josepha said that she could not breathe lying down. At last she consented to eat something. The nourishment did her good, her weakness diminished, and her breathing grew easier. The girl put some wood in the stove and returned to her work in the kitchen. Josepha remained lost in thought. To her, death was deliverance, but Freya, what would become of him if he lost her also? This alone rendered it hard to die. The damp wood in the stove sputtered and hissed like the voices of wrangling women. It was the fire witch, which always proclaims the approach of any evil. Josepha shook her head. What could be worse than the evil which had already befallen her poor cousin and herself? The fire witch continued to shriek and lament, but Josepha did not understand her. A pair of crows perched in an old pine tree outside the window croaked so suddenly that she started in terror. Ah, it was very lonely up here. What would it be when Freya lived all alone in the house and waited months in vain for the heartless woman who remembered neither her husband nor her child? She had not troubled herself about the living. Why should she seek the little grave where lay the dead? A loud knock on the door of the house echoed through the silence. Josepha listened. Surely it could not be the doctor already. The maid opened it. Heavy footsteps and the voices of men were heard in the entry. Then a dog howled. The stupid servant opened the door of the room and called, "Junk for Josepha, here are 2 hunters, who are so tired tramping over the snow that they would like to rest a while." "Can they come in? There is no fire anywhere else." Josepha, though so ill, of course could not refuse admittance to the freezing men who were already on the threshold. Rising with an effort from the sofa, she pushed some chairs for the strangers near the stove. "I am ill," she said in great embarrassment, "but if you wish to rest and warm yourselves here, I beg." "We are very grateful," said one of the hunters, a gentleman with a red moustache and piercing eyes. "If we do not disturb you, we will gladly accept your hospitality. We are not familiar with the neighbourhood and have lost our way. We came from beyond the frontier and have been wading through the snow 5 hours." Meanwhile, at a sign from Josepha, the maidservant had taken the gentleman's cloaks and hunting gear. "See, this is our booty," said the other hunter. "If we might invite you to dine with us, I should almost venture to ask if this worthy lass could not roast the hare for us. Our cousin, Countess Wildenau, will surely forgive us this little trespass upon her preserves. Are you relatives of Countess Wildenau? Certainly, her nearest and most faithful ones." Josepha, in her mortal weakness, felt as if crushed by the presence of these strangers, with their heavy hunting boots and loud voices. She tried to take refuge in the kitchen on the pretence of roasting the hare herself, but both gentlemen earnestly protested against it. "No, indeed, that would be fine business to drive you out of your room when you are ill. In that case, we must leave the house at once." The red-bearded gentleman, cousin Wildenau himself, sprang from his chair and almost forced Josepha to go back to her sofa. "There, my dear madam, or miss. Now do me the honour to take your seat again and allow us to remain a short time until the roast is ready, then you must dine with us." A faint smile hovered around Josepha's parched lips. "I thank you, but I am too ill to eat." "You are really very ill," said the stranger with kindly solicitude. "You are feverish. I fear we are disturbing you very much. Pray send us away if we annoy you." Yet he knew perfectly well that she could not help asking the unbidden guests to stay. "But my dear madam, or miss? Josepha never answered the question. Are you doing nothing to relieve your illness? Have you had no physician? No, we are in such a secluded place. A physician cannot always be had. But I am expecting one today. Why? It is strange to live in this wilderness. And how uncomfortable you are. You haven't even a stool, said the red-haired cousin, putting his huge hunting muff, after warming it at the stove, under her feet. Josepha tried to refuse it, but he would not listen. You need not mind us. We are sick nurses ourselves. We commanded a sanitary battalion in the war. So we understand a little what to do. You are suffering from asthma. It is difficult for you to breathe, so you must sit comfortably. There. Now put my cousin's muff at your back. That's better, isn't it? But pray, come, no contradiction. You must be comfortable. Josepha was ashamed. The gentleman was so kind, so solicitous about her. There were good people in the world. The neglected, desolate heart gratefully appreciated the unusual kindness. But I am really astonished to find everything so primitive. Our honoured cousin really ought to have done something more for your comfort. Not even a sofa, cushion, no carpet. I should have thought she would have paid more attention to so faithful a— He courteously suppressed the word servant, and correcting himself said assistant. Josepha made no answer, but her lips curled bitterly, significantly. Wildenau noted it. Dissatisfied, escaped his lips, so low that only his companion heard it. You have been here a long time, I suppose. How many years? Have I been with her? Said Josepha frankly. Since the last Passion play? That will be 10 years next summer. Ah, true, you are a native of Oberammergau, said the Baron, with the manner of one familiar with the facts, whose memory has failed for an instant. I suppose you came to the Countess at the same time as the Christus? Yes. Is he a relative of yours? Yes, my cousin. He is here still, isn't he? Why, of course. He is— Her. What is his title? Steward. Is he at home? No, he has gone to the city for a doctor. Oh, I am very sorry. We should have been glad to make his acquaintance. We have heard so many pleasant things about him. A man in whom our cousin was so much interested. Then she speaks of him? Oh, to her intimate friends, certainly, said Wildenau, equivocally gazing intently at Josepha, whose face beamed with joy at the thought that the Countess spoke kindly of Freya. Why is he never seen in the city? He must live like a hermit up here. Yes, heaven knows that. He ought to visit my cousin sometimes in the city. Everybody would be glad to know the Oberammergau Christus. But if she doesn't wish it, said Josepha thoughtlessly. Why, that would be another matter certainly, but she has never told me so. Why shouldn't she wish it? Murmured Wildenau with well-feigned surprise. Because she is ashamed of him. Ah! Wildenau almost caught his breath at the significance of the word. But tell me, why does her Freya— Isn't that his name— submit to it? Josepha shrugged her shoulders. Yes, what can he do about it? A pause ensued. Josepha stopped, as if fearing to say too much. The two gentlemen had become very thoughtful. At last Wildenau resumed the conversation. I don't understand how a man who surely might find a pleasant position anywhere can be so dependent on a fine lady's whims. You won't take it amiss. I see that your kinsman's position troubles you. Were I in his place, I would give up the largest salary rather than— Salary? Interrupted Josepha with flashing eyes. Do you suppose that my cousin would do anything for the sake of a salary? Oh, you don't know him. If the Countess described him to you in that way, the shame is hers. Wildenau listened intently. But my dear woman, that isn't what I meant. You would not let me finish. I was just going to add that such a motive would not affect your kinsman, that it could be nothing but sincere devotion which bound him to our cousin, a loyalty which apparently wins little gratitude. Yes, I always tell him so, but he won't admit it, even though his heart should break. Two dark interlaced veins in Josepha's sunken, transparent temples throbbed feverishly. But how do you feel? We are certainly disturbing you, said the Baron. Oh no, it does not matter, replied Josepha courteously. Could you not take us into some other room? The Countess doubtless comes here constantly. There must be other apartments which can be heated. Yes, but no fire has been made in them for weeks. The stoves will smoke. Has not the Countess been here for so long? No, she scarcely ever comes now. But the time must be very long to you and your cousin. You were doubtless accustomed to the Countess' visits. Certainly, replied Josepha. Lost in thought, when I think how it used to be, and how things are now. Wildenau glanced around the room, then said softly, And the little son? He is dead. Josepha stared at him in terror. Do you know that? I know all. My cousin has his picture in her boudoir, a splendid child. Josepha's poor feverish brain was growing more and more confused. The tears she had scarcely conquered flowed again. Yes, wasn't he, and to let such a child die without troubling herself about him? It is inexcusable, said Wildenau. If the Countess ever speaks of it again, tell her that Josepha loved it far more than she, for she followed it to the grave while the mother enjoyed her life. She must be ashamed then. I will tell her. It is a pity about the beautiful child. Was it not like an infant Christ? Indeed it was. And now I know what picture you mean. In Jerusalem, where the child was christened, a copy, as they called it, of the infant Christ hung in the chapel over the baptismal font. The Countess afterwards bought the picture on account of its resemblance to the boy. I suppose it resembles Herr Freya, too, the Baron remarked carelessly. Somewhat, but the mother more. Baron Wildenau began to find the room too warm and went to the window a moment to get the air, while his companion, horrified by these disclosures, shook his head. He would gladly have told the deluded woman that they had only learned the child's death from a woodcutter whom they met in the forest, but he dared not contradict his cousin. After a pause, Wildenau again turned to Josepha. He saw that there was danger in delay, for at any moment the fever might increase to such a degree that she would begin to rave and no longer be capable of making a deposition. The truth must be discovered, now or never. He felt, however, that Josepha's was no base nature which could be led to betray her employer by ordinary means. Caution and reflection were necessary. I am really touched by your fidelity to my cousin. Anyone who can claim such a nature is fortunate. I thank you in her name. He held out his hand. But she replied with her usual blunt honesty, I don't deserve your thanks, sir. I have not remained here for the sake of the Countess, but on account of the child and my unfortunate cousin. She has been kind to me, but if I should see her today, I would tell her openly that I would never forgive her treatment of the child and Joseph, no matter what she did. The child is dead, and my cousin will die too. Thank heaven, I shall not live to witness it. I understand you perfectly. Oh, I know my cousin. And my poor dear Fräulein Josepha. I may call you Fräulein now, may I not, since you are no longer obliged to pass for the child's mother. It was an unprecedented sacrifice for you. Alas! My dear Fräulein, you and your cousin must be prepared to fare still worse, to be entirely forgotten, for I can positively assure you that the Countess is about to wed the hereditary Prince of Metten-Barnheim. What? Josepha shrieked loudly. Wildenau watched her intently. She has just gone to Cannes, where the old Duke is staying, and the announcement of the engagement is daily expected. It is impossible. It cannot be, murmured Josepha, trembling in every limb. But why not? She is free, has a right to dispose of her hand, Wildenau persisted. No, she is not. She cannot marry, cried Josepha, starting from her sofa in despair and standing before them with glowing cheeks and red hair like a flame which blazes up once more before expiring. For heaven's sake, it would be a crime. But who is to prevent it? Asked Wildenau breathlessly. I, groaned Josepha, summoning her last strength. You, my dear woman, what can you do? More than you suppose. Then tell me, that we may unite to prevent the crime ere it is too late. Yes, by heaven. Before I will allow her to do Joseph this wrong, I will turn traitor to her. But Herr Freya has no right to ask the Countess not to marry again. No right, she repeated with terrible earnestness. Are you so sure of that? He is only the Countess' lover. Her lover, sobbed Josepha in mingled wrath and anguish. Joseph, you noble upright man, must this be said of you? I don't understand. If he is not her lover, what is he? Josepha could bear no more. He is her husband, her legally wedded husband. The Baron almost staggered under this unexpected, unprecedented revelation. Controlling himself with difficulty, he seized the sick woman's hand, as if to sustain her lest she should break down ere he had extorted the last disclosure from her. The last thing he must know. Only tell me where and by whom the marriage ceremony was performed. As if under the gaze of a serpent, the victim yielded to the stronger will. At Frankenberg, Martin and I were witnesses. She slipped from his hand, her senses grew confused, her eyes became glassy, her chest heaved convulsively in the struggle for breath, but the one word which she still had consciousness to utter was enough for the Wildenaus. When, a few hours later, Freya returned with the physician and the priest, whom he had thoughtfully brought with him, he found Josepha alone on the sofa, speechless, and in the last agonies of death. The physician, after examining her, said that an acute inflammation of the lungs had followed the tuberculosis from which she had long suffered and hastened her end. The priest gave her the last sacrament and remained with Freya, sitting beside the bed in which she had been laid. The death struggle was terrible. She seemed to be constantly trying to tell Freya something which she was unable to utter. 3 times life appeared to have departed, and 3 times she rallied again, as if she could not die without having relieved her heart of its burden. Vain. It was useless for Freya to put his ear to her lips. He could not understand her faltering words. It was a terrible night. At last, toward morning, she grew calm, and now she could die. Leaning on his breast, she ceased her struggles to speak, and slowly breathed her last. She had conquered, and she now knew that he would conquer also. She bowed her head with a smile, and her last glance was fixed on him. A look of reconciliation rested on her matures. Her soul soared upward. Day was dawning.